Hi, everyone. Well, stellar panel is absolutely right. And I'm going to introduce this panel in just a second. But I wanted to say, first of all, that throughout the course of the conference, I've heard a lot of really interesting perspectives. I've heard a lot of really innovative applications and technologies and approaches, and I've heard a lot about data and connecting government to citizens and enabling better service delivery. And I got to say, we have something a little bit different here with respect to our panel, because here we have representatives from the Department of Defense, from the intelligence community, and from the Department of Homeland Security. And they're going to be talking about how they are dealing with very real challenges in their environments. I think you'll see it's a little bit different from some of the stuff we've heard so far. So let me start by introducing Dave Wennergren. Dave is the Deputy CIO of the Department of Defense. He is also the Vice Chair of the Federal CIO Council, which is a group of federal CIOs that get together to tackle issues in a very collaborative way and share information. And Dave's particular challenge is really about getting information into the hands of warfighters so that they can make real-time decisions on the battlefield, while at the same time keeping that information out of the hands of the bad guys. And so he's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on at the DoD. Michelle Westlander-Quaid is here with us. She's with the ODNI. And her particular challenge is how to transform the culture and leverage innovative technology to take 17 disparate intelligence organizations and get them to act as a community, to share information and to collaborate so that we have the situational awareness we need to respond to threats to our security. Alan Cohn, down at the end, is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Policy Strategic Plans at the Department of Homeland Security. And Alan is responsible for leading something that's called the Quadrennial Homeland Security Review. The Quadrennial Homeland Security Review, for anyone who's not familiar, the QHSR as we're going to be calling it, is a 4-year strategic planning review that's sort of a soup to nuts look at what DHS does and how it does its business, achieves its mission. It's quite a comprehensive review. And early on in the process of leading this, Alan became and is an evangelist, a real champion for engaging DHS partners and stakeholders in that strategic planning process in a meaningful way. The challenge that he faces is that there are tens of thousands of those partners and stakeholders, and they're all over the country, and some of them are all over the world. And so I'm really excited to hear how these folks are dealing with those very real challenges in their organizations. Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at DoD?
Absolutely. Good afternoon. We're the last thing between all of you and happy hour, so we'll try to make it lively and keep you energized with us. So wherever you are, whatever you do, your world is more like mine than you might want to admit. Right? Because I'm the DoD guy. But hey, you know, in my world, we have this tagline about what it's all about today, and it's about effectively managing information in a contested environment. Because there are these two things that we will come back to over and over again, and has been the conversation of much of our afternoon about the fabulous opportunities that the information age provide to us in terms of sharing and collaboration, and the significance of the threat about security and how those things work together. There is a lot of great stuff going on in my world. You don't always hear about it because it happens fast. And it doesn't always happen in places that the word gets out about. The only person who has a worse situation like that than me is my teammate from the intelligence community who's also doing fabulous things, but again, sometimes the word doesn't get out. There's a whole lot of fabulous work that's going on in the power of what a service-oriented enterprise can do for you, right? That this idea about making data available and using Web 2.0 tools to mash things up provides new capabilities extremely quickly. Right? And so if you look across my organization, it's not just happening in the business support part of the organization. You see it happening throughout the warfighting and intelligence domains. In fact, that's actually the place where it's happening most. So you look at things like maritime domain awareness and this idea about multiple federal agencies that got together, and instead of doing what we would have done in the past, which we would have said, so we'd like to know more about commercial vessels coming into harbors and whether they're a problem or not, so let's take legacy systems and spend years replacing them with a new big giant system, then instead you can make data discoverable. You can post it, you could overlay it on Google Earth, you can make things happen, and I can get on any computer now and see it. Any harbor in the world what cargoes and crews are coming in. Blue Force tracking, who are the good guys on the battlefield, is all about information sharing. What's happening in the IED defeat world? These are all about mashups in this Web 2.0 phenomenon. And, you know, contrary to some popular belief, there's a huge amount of Web 2.0 work going on across the department. A phenomenal explosion in the use of wikis and blogs and Twitter and Facebook and these tools, and not just for the quality of life and public affairs recruiting kinds of things, which are of course really crucially important, but in actual mission-related kind of stuff. And there's also a lot of work getting done in this idea about the power of the cloud. There's a Defense Information Systems Agency initiative about RACE, Rapid Access to Computing Environment, a cloud computing foray for us. Forge.mil, which has been up on the Twitter board over the course of the day. This ability to test and develop in the same environment in which you're going to operate. So there's a lot of great stuff going on. The challenge for us is that it changes everything about our organization, right? Because the organization is still sort of designed for the, like any big organization, about building big IT systems, right? And so this change about how you work in this collaborative world is really fascinating for us. But it changes how you look at architecture and costs and acquisition and all those kinds of things. It will be a fascinating journey, and what we want, what our vision is this idea about you can stick your card in any computing device. You can get to the people and information that you need to get your job done. The channels by which you come in look a lot more like an iPhone. The architecture, the availability looks a lot more like the iPhone App Store. Right? This is a way to get ourselves to these new capabilities being developed and delivered much more rapidly, and it's a huge prize for all of us.
Thank you, Dave. Michelle, why don't you tell us what's going on in the intelligence community and in ODNI?
I know, Lindy, you asked me to talk about driving collaboration in the intelligence community. In my experience throughout my career, I've been working that in one capacity or another, whether when I started in industry supporting national security or even coming into government after 9/11. And I have to say we've made a lot of progress over these years. Back in 1999, I got engaged in trying to see how we could bring different agencies together in a multi-ant kind of collaborative environment, multi-ant meaning multi-intelligence disciplines. At the time, believe it or not, National Security Agency was leading the way, and they had looked at what the gaming community have done in Dungeons & Dragons and leveraged that kind of code and elicited MITRE to develop a tool called Collaborative Virtual Workspace, and they had put that out across their enterprise to enable 24/7 virtual operations. So great for their vision. But then we looked at how are we going to connect other people in that environment. MITRE being an FFRDC, doesn't commercialize tools, they put that code out there, and then we had tools like Information Workspace that came out. Now, while that was great pathfinding over a decade ago, those tools were monolithic, and so they were also client-server. They had all these great capabilities bundled in one app, and if you couldn't run it on your system, you couldn't participate. Furthermore, you could only collaborate with people who were on your network running that same tool. So we desperately needed to migrate to the more loosely coupled capabilities that would start to bridge across the various domains. So what we see in a lot of cases whenever you're trying to do this information sharing and collaboration is you got the culture factor, which is the people, the policy factor, which relates to your business processes, and then the technology. And those of you who've tried to do this, you know the technology is the easiest part. A lot of cases we need encouragement from people external to help us along those lines, and through dialogue with Congress over the years, we're able to see where they were encouraging us that you've adopted collaboration, this is good, but continue to modernize those capabilities. The advent of Web 2.0 really tore down those technical barriers. Finally, we had those loosely coupled capabilities. We're able to bridge from people on different systems, people who are on wireless devices versus people who are on very robust systems with large bandwidth, and have that kind of common denominator. And I'd say the intelligence community recognized the value of the web back in 1994 when they established the IntelLink management office. And the IntelLink brand still exists today, but that has evolved into IC Enterprise Services. In fact, they have rolled out capabilities including federated search with Google that we are now providing as a service to the Department of Defense through partnership. And while IntelLink led the way in the intelligence community, we had to continue to evolve those services as well. And so over time, we've tried to elicit the input from our early adopters to say, what tools would you like to see? And when I was deputy CIO of the intelligence community, I actually went out and blogged about our blogging software. Made a comment of, this is not as easy to use in my experience as the tools I use out on the internet, like Blogger. it was amazing the response I got back from input all across the community of we agree and we would like to see these tools. It was great. I took that input, handed it over to our IC Enterprise Services group, and they rolled out a new blogging capability in 6 months. And so we've seen that kind of evolution, and the Intelligence Community Enterprise Services continues to do that kind of innovation. Some key policy enablers that we have seen that had the opportunity to be a part of that have been in work over the last few years and recently were signed, and if you Google on the internet you can find them, is we have Intelligence Community Directive 503. What that did is that transformed the way we do certification and accreditation. And we did that in partnership with the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And the objective there is our previous policies were huge impediments. It took twice as long to implement something, cost twice as much, you got half the capability. That was my tagline, is that we needed to do something different. And what we have now is the concept of a risk manager who's looking at the value to the mission and trying to balance that with the potential security risks. We didn't have that before. We were very risk averse. Furthermore, it allows you to take a body of evidence developed by one agency or a member of the Department of Defense or elsewhere and say, if you've adopted this technology, I can accept that from my agency and make an accreditation decision. So that has allowed more rapid adoption of that kind of technology. We also have Intelligence Community Directive 501, which really mandated that all data that is being collected be discoverable and accessible by appropriately cleared persons. So those are drivers that are allowing us to embrace the Web 2.0, have the metadata tagging standards, allow people to do queries, to discover everything that is out there, and even if you don't have immediate access, to find a way to gain access to that data if it appears relevant. And then on the HR side, we've been very fortunate of recognizing that collaboration skills are key for human development, are also things we want to see in leaders. And so that is now part of our intelligence community capabilities catalog.
Michelle, thank you very much. Alan, why don't you tell us about what's going on with the quadrennial review?
Okay, so the Department of Homeland Security is conducting the first quadrennial Homeland Security review this year. It's the idea is modeled, of course, on the Defense Department's quadrennial defense review. And our challenge with the quadrennial review is how do we meaningfully engage our stakeholder base? The Homeland Security enterprise is much broader than the Department of Homeland Security. It includes other federal departments and agencies, states and local governments, non-governmental associations, private sector organizations, and the general public. So it's distributed, it's decentralized, and there's really no way to physically convene it in a meaningful way. But Secretary Napolitano came in. She's very committed to engagement with our stakeholders. So for that engagement, we were looking for a tool that could do two things. It could provide a way to collaborate with a greater number of stakeholders and to provide transparency into our review. And so we've been working with the National Academy of Public Administration using their National Dialogue platform as an adjunct to our quadrennial Homeland Security Review study groups as we go through the process. And so what we wanted to do was give a way for our external stakeholders to meaningfully participate in the process and to do it earlier than they normally would be in other projects that the department might have done, where we would have finished the review and then asked for public comment. How could we give a window into the workings of the study groups and then give our external stakeholders the opportunity to participate in real time, to comment, and to discuss, to engage with each other on the content that the study groups were putting together before it had been approved and cleared and baked into a final product. And so this is part of a larger stakeholder engagement strategy that includes more traditional outreach methods. But what we've done is scheduled 3 national dialogue sessions, each lasting a week, starting on Monday or running through Sunday. So folks who can use the tool during the week at work can do so. Folks who need to do it at night or on the weekend have the opportunity to do that as well. We ran our first dialogue session beginning at the beginning of August. Our second dialogue session just closed yesterday. And our third dialogue session will start beginning September 28th. And again, our challenge and our intent was to put up the study group product and engage the public in a discussion. At the beginning of the first dialogue, we put up more goals and vision for the different missions of the Homeland Security enterprise and for some of our key tools that we use. For this last dialogue, we got into a little more detail. we put up the goals and objectives that the study groups had worked out, asked for folks to rate those, and then opened really an open comment period for folks to comment on if these are the objectives, the priorities that we need to achieve, what's the best way to achieve these? And then that will be brought back into the study groups as they finalize out a set of key strategic outcomes for the enterprise. For the first dialogue, we had around 8,000 unique visitors participate. We had a little over 200 comments, and the average time folks spent on the site was about 6 minutes. We took that back. We looked at the kind of participation that we were getting, the numbers of people who were coming, the numbers of people who were participating. We made some adjustments to the way that we presented data and information. And in the second dialogue, which we ran for an extra couple of days because of the Labor Day holiday, we raised our unique visitors up to over 11,000 unique visitors with over 400 base comments, which also now have nested conversations within them. So these 400 comments are just the beginning point for discussions, not only comments by the stakeholders, but discussions among the stakeholders and for members of the study group to engage with the stakeholders on the questions that they're raising. And so we're very excited about this. We are hopeful that this provides a meaningful opportunity for our stakeholders, both our traditional stakeholders and for folks who are not the presidents of associations or the heads of companies, to have a window into the quadrennial review process and a voice in that process as we go along. We'll provide our report to Congress by December 31st, 2009, and you'll all get to judge whether we did a good job or not. But we're very enthusiastic about the ability to use these kinds of tools to allow our stakeholders to participate in this kind of a review.
Thanks, Ellen. You know, one of the things I love about this particular exercise is going out and doing something like this and engaging stakeholders and trying to build a community is really difficult when a lot of, as you mentioned, your stakeholders are really dispersed, and a lot of them don't even see themselves as, you know, partners or stakeholders of DHS. And so the work that's going on in this particular dialogue that informs the quadrennial review is also the foundation of a longer-term community of stakeholders that you can go back to again and again, which is terrific. I want to ask a question because I think it's important to share with people in the audience what you did to be successful, because it sounds like from the overviews you provided, there's been a lot of success. You're making great progress. So maybe I'll start with you, Alan, and then work the other way down the couch. Share with us one or two things that you thought were really, really critical to your success.
Well, I think the first and foremost is that you have to be a champion for this kind of activity. Obviously, within government, there's sometimes skepticism about opening the processes of government to a wider view. And so I would really encourage for those our government colleagues to really try new approaches to engaging stakeholders. And to folks outside of government, not to be cynical about those attempts, to engage in the process, to see what happens. Before each of our dialogues, right at the outset, we've had roundtables with bloggers from the Homeland Security community. And this is an opportunity for us to share with them what we're looking for in the dialogues, but they also share with us comments and critiques that they've gotten as they go along. And we've really seen a different posture as we've gone along, of initial skepticism, to encouragement, to enthusiasm, to critiques, not only about what we were posting, but how things, ease of use or presentation. And we've made an effort to really address those in real time as we go along. So I would really say try these tactics, be an advocate for them, and then listen to the community as you go along.
Great, thank you. Michelle, how about in the intelligence community? What do you think has been really critical to the ability to bring some of these disparate agencies together to share information in new ways?
Well, the key has always been buy-in from the top leadership, and getting them engaged. And we're seeing as in this new era that we need a new type of leadership. It's the facilitator, somebody who's actively engaged and helping facilitate this kind of collaboration, the adoption of the new technology. I gave an example in our media discussion about Intellink when it was established back in 1994, some 15 years ago. Some leader in the intelligence community had to see that this is valuable, have the courage to say, you know, I'm going to take this community where we've never gone before and actually take on the risk, and gave an interim authority to operate. We have a lot of paperwork we have to do to adopt these new tools and capabilities, and we ran under an interim authority to operate for over a decade. As Vint Cerf was saying with the internet, it's the pilot that didn't end. It was successful, and we rolled out, you know, wikis and blogs and microblogging and chat and other capabilities, but we needed that top cover. But also what is key is addressing the middle management as well, because as leadership was setting the vision, it was the middle managers who were doing that translation to their constituency. And so we had to help them see the value of, you know, we had to find people who needed who needed to collaborate, and then show them how they could better collaborate with the Web 2.0 type of technologies. And one key enabler to that was finding the early adopters and enlisting them and showing them the value, and they can help to build that critical mass till you get to that tipping point where this new way of doing business becomes an accepted standard operating procedure. And I think another thing is to say, you know, set the clear goals, set the rules of engagement. I know when we were working on the Intelligence Community Directive 503 and wanted to engage people, experts from across the globe, literally, we made the suggestion of we wanted to be able to do blogs and get people to use the Web 2.0 technologies, and, you know, the security people just, that petrified them. And then to say is you have to be able to allow people do what they do in airspace and cyberspace to kind of enable this type of collaboration. And also a lot of times if you're the technical expert, you need to just use your best judgment and move out and make that decision, because you can't accept a no from someone who can't give you a yes in the first place.
Nice, thank you. She's good. Dave, okay, so the DoD is a command and control environment. How do you shift? How have you been successful in shifting to more collaboration?
So there's a quote I love in the book Execution by Larry Bossian and Ram Charan that says, leaders get the behaviors that they exhibit and tolerate. And so I will echo the comments of my teammates here, you know, that it starts with leaders having a covenant responsibility to give their people the tools that they need to get out of the way and turn them loose so you can unleash their creativity, and then to support them. And when that happens, great things can happen. There's a fascinating conundrum in large organizations that for new ideas to gain energy, they have to get escape velocity from the current fabric of the organization. And so that's why phrases like pilots and experiments and interim and things like that tend not to draw the fear and discontent from the culture of the organization, you know, are so useful, because you can use them really effectively to get things launched. But any great new initiative has to be able to fold back into the fabric of the organization if it's going to have sustainability beyond the initial energy of the person who champions it. And so that's the fascinating ride that you got to take things on. And one of the things that helps is moving with speed. The things that fail most for us are the things that take time. If you can, instead of having the one big bang where I'm going to work a really long time to make something really super good that never quite gets here because the technology changes and the people changes, and you can replace that with a strategy about, I'm going to deliver new capabilities in 30, 60, 90 days, get them out there, build enthusiasm and energy about them, and then build from there. Those are the places where we're finding great success.
Very nice. Escape velocity. I hadn't heard that before. I really like that.
Before the antibodies get you.
So the next question I have is around learning, because what I heard in all of these conversations were that you did things, you tried things, you learned from them, you made adjustments. So help us understand what it is that you learned, so that folks in the audience, when they go and try and do similar things in their organizations, aren't going to have to learn these things all over again. Dave, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a whole lot of like things, but they boil down to those simple lessons in life, you know. It's really important to have a main thing, right? So for my team, it's creating an information advantage for our people and our mission partners. And we assess everything that the DoD CIO team does against that goal. Because it's all about the flow of information, and it's about these unanticipated users that you don't even know who they are that you're going to need to share with tomorrow. Right? If they can't assess how what they're doing is going to help that, then they're not really helping me, and they're not really helping the people that we support, right? So you start with the main thing. You need to have some kind of performance management structure in place that doesn't create meaningless goals that bog you down in reporting and oversight, but instead actually allow you to build confidence about where you're heading and change your direction as you get there, right? So measuring the progress of your plan. If you're an optimist, you call that management by attention. If you're a pessimist, you call it management by embarrassment. I don't really care which way you look at it. But the idea of the things that you measure, the things you focus your time and attention on, make a huge difference. You really have to accept the fact that the future is here, right? Globalization happened. Web 2.0 happened. And people that fret about that kind of stuff, just get themselves all balled up about it. And instead, if you can figure out how to leverage that future, you can do some really important things really fast. Use the tools that are out there, right? So we've had this conversation over the course of the day about, about where's DoD headed, right? There's got to be a path about responsible and effective use of the tools that are out there and being part of the collaborative family that's creating the next set of tools.
Thank you. Michelle?
I think one thing that has been key is the past directors of national intelligence and the current have tried to move the very risk-averse intelligence community from the need-to-know mindset to the need-to-share mindset to the responsibility to provide mandate. I mean, it got to the point is that is your mandate. And so that from the top down, and then measurans to hold people accountable for what are your expected outcomes and to show the results and to give those timelines. One of the things that I think as technologists, so many times you have to help people see not only how their operations are better enabled by the technology, but how often you can provide more security. A lot of cases, we left air gaps between systems, thinking people would then not inadvertently transfer things from a higher sensitivity level system to a lower sensitivity, when in reality, they would do it. They had to. We had to collaborate to do jobs. Time is money in business. Time is lives in the intelligence community. And showing the security people that actually, by enabling the transfer of this information electronically using tools that are available today, you not only meet the timelines needed for operations, but you also had that audit trail. And so you could see those flags and say, this is anomalous behavior, or somebody overrides a filter, to go and look into that. So I think a lot of it is trying to understand your constituency, the people that you're trying to win over and what drives them, and how to translate that into their language and see how that benefits them, whether it's the operators, the policymakers, or the security staff.
Thanks. And Alan, you've spoken a little bit already about taking the first phase and tweaking a little and learning through that process to better the second phase. One or two things that you thought were really key learnings?
Well, sure. First thing I did want to do is echo Michelle's comment that don't take no for an answer. Keep pushing through the no. Obviously, one of the things that government wrestles with in using Web 2.0 applications is the Paperwork Reduction Act, which was put up as a barrier in front of us as an insurmountable barrier. When we actually had a chance to sit down with the Office of Management and Budget and tell them what we wanted to do, they were extremely supportive and very helpful. But we never would have known that if we hadn't pushed through the initial barrier. But the other thing that we learned, I think the key thing that we learned was in using, and as a policy person rather than a technical person, when we're using these tools, keep things simple and direct. That was one of the key things that we changed from the first dialogue to the second, was really slim down the content, make it simple, distill your thoughts so that you can clearly and effectively communicate. That had two effects. Number one, it got us better engagement through the tool with our stakeholders. Number two, it was a good exercise for us. It helped us in our review to sharpen our thoughts and distill our thinking and to be clearer and more concise and direct as to what we were saying about our enterprise.
And I do have to say that Alan could be the poster child for don't take no for an answer through the process. There was a lot of initial, oh no, that cannot be done. And he would just come back and say, what do you mean? A long-term planning process at the Department of Homeland Security can't involve our partners. That's crazy. So I agree. Okay, a pithy wrap-up, because we've got a minute or two left. And I'm looking to you guys to tell folks in the audience, based on your experience, as we wrap up this conference, this is the last panel before the closing session, any thoughts on what you would recommend folks can leave here and take with them and go do? Michelle, why don't we start with you on this one?
Well, some things that are on the horizon and in the intelligence community, and I think for the audience here, is that we're looking at how to enable, heard the geospatial tagging, how valuable that was, and we're looking at geospatially tagging a lot of our services. And I would say, if there's those out here who have innovative ideas, when you've heard our conversation to continue that dialogue, we're very interested in that, because we realize we don't necessarily always need more tools, but we need more sophistication and sense-making of how are these tools better enabling the quality of analysis, of us connecting the dots, of us meeting timelines better than we did before. And so I think that's something key, is we're very open to continue the dialogue. We are the government, but we're trying to be innovative, and we will take as much support as we can get.
Alan, what do you think? Any thoughts on what folks can...
Well, I have an easy one. Participate in our third dialogue at homelandsecuritydialogue.org. But really, I mean, I think that the main message is just try it. For the government folks, try it. And for the folks out in the community, when the government initiates a project like this, or an outreach or use of these tools for engagement in this kind of process, try it. And judge us on our results. If we use the tool well and we use the collaboration well, then judge us well. And if we don't, then judge us poorly. But try it.
Dave, pearls of wisdom?
So you're going to groan, but I need you all to be positive forces for change. People have really good intentions, but people become really comfortable in the way things are because they're expert at the way things are. And sometimes it's hard for them to step out of their comfort zone. I'm not suggesting that you like stupid things, but to the extent that you see good things going on, you need to be rabid voices of support about the good things, because you are the experts that your teammates will look to decide whether they should be jaundiced, fearful, jaded, or cynical. And they will form that opinion based upon how you respond. So if I'm doing something silly, you should call me on it. But if you see something good happen in one of our places or one of your places, you need to be a vocal advocate about it so that you can help build the confidence. We do a pretty lousy job sometimes of storytelling to help build confidence, so that as you go through the problems of change and the difference between expectations and results that happen for a while the perturbations happen, that we don't lose confidence, so that we can gain the escape velocity to get to the better place.
If I may add on that, I think a lot of you work in all of our worlds, and I think we believe that we could all do better integration across the civilian, military, homeland security, humanitarian side, and so helping us see where we have opportunities.
Thank you very much. Well, speaking of escape velocity, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Dave. Very insightful, very helpful. And we are going to let Tim and Andy come up and do the closing session.